One woman is dead, another person is hurt after a stabbing in Keystone Heights. TV 20's Cameron Lund spoke with a man who tells us why crime is on the rise in his neighborhood.
Clay County Sheriff's deputies responded to a woman's 911 call. She said her boyfriend was attacking her. When they got to the scene, they found two people with stab wounds. 32-year-old William Burrows is in jail for murder after one of the victims died at the hospital.
One resident tells me that the farther back you walk into this neighborhood, the worse it gets. But he also says that High Ridge Estates didn't used to be like that.
And I'd like to see it get cleaned back up to where it's safe around here, because we've had girls out on this trail get raped. And, you know, I've got jumped twice out here on this trail.
Vassar says drugs are often the cause of many violent crimes in this part of Keystone Heights.
The drugs that are coming through here, they're trying to keep a lockdown on it, but the minute the law shows up in here, everybody's on their phones and telling everybody that the law is here, and so everybody goes to hiding.
Burrows is still waiting for his first appearance. Sheriff's Office officials have not yet set his bond amount. Reporting in Keystone Heights, Cameron Lund, TV 20 News.